One of the questions I get asked the most is probably, what's your favorite lens? To which I usually answer, whichever one gets the job done. That is, until I started using this lens, the Canon RF 50mm 1.2. Now this is a $2,300 lens. That ain't cheap, but is it worth it? Let's talk about it. If you're new here, hi, my name is JeO. I'm a full-time photographer and content creator for my business, Muse Media. I'm just getting started again here on YouTube after taking a couple years away, so if you would consider subscribing, I would greatly appreciate it. I've been a Canon shooter for many years. It's the camera that I started with, it's the camera that I use to this day. And like many photo enthusiasts, my favorite lens to use was the kit lens that came with my Canon Rebel T. And that was the EF 50mm 1.8. Not expensive by any means. I think you can get them for like $100, but it gave me my first taste of what a lower aperture prime lens could do for my images. It's also super cute and small and easy to travel with. Even though it's a cheap lens, it produced really cool images with amazing bokeh and made me fall in love with photography. Once photography became a full-time gig, this little guy got retired to the shelf to collect dust, and I upgraded to the RF 24 to 70mm, which is on my camera right now. It never leaves my camera. It is my daily workhorse. However, I'm feeling a little bit nostalgic, and I miss that feeling that the little nifty 50 gave me. So I rented the RF 50mm 1.2 to see how it compares to my old EF 50mm 1.8 and see if this is worth investing in. Does a professional photographer need a $2,300 lens, or can you get away with something that's $100? Can you really tell the difference? So today I'm going to put these two lenses to the test and do a side-by-side comparison. I'll do some indoor natural light self-portraits, and then I'll head outside to get some backlit portraits as well. I just want to see for myself if I notice a $2,000 difference. Now, a few disclaimers here. I am not a techie YouTuber. I'm not going to do a deep dive into the specs of these. I feel like there are a ton of videos already that do that. I'm going to give some specs that I'm interested in, but I'm also going to give my honest opinion as a full-time photographer who shoots a lot of portraits. All I care about is if the images are sharp and if the lens performs how I need it to. Second disclaimer. Obviously, I know that this lens is not going to compare to this lens. There's a reason one of them is $2,300 and the other one is $100. You can tell just by looking at them and feeling them which one is more expensive. The goal here is just to see what we can get away with, because not every photographer, especially a beginner, is going to be able to drop thousands of dollars on a new lens. You can get entire kits for less than the price of this lens right here. So we just want to test out what's possible and if we can accomplish our goals and create great work. So let's go ahead and break down a few things about these lenses. This 50mm, also called the Nifty 50, has an EF mount. It's compact, made out of plastic, uses a stepping motor for autofocusing, has a 1.8 max aperture, and costs about $100. This 50mm has an RF mount. It's heavy, it's made of metal, has a control ring to adjust the settings, has a 1.2 max aperture, and costs about $2,300. Now, I'm using the EF to R lens adapter with the Nifty 50 on my Canon EOS R, which is also about $100. So if you wanted to get this plus the Nifty 50, you'd be looking at around $200 for both. But after this review, you might think it's worth it. So for the first comparison, I set my camera up inside my living room in front of a big window since all I needed was some natural light. Sadie thought this meant it was time to play, so she took it as an opportunity to grab my slipper, which she's not supposed to do. I thought throwing it on the table would be a good idea, but clearly wasn't stopping her from bringing it back. Anyway, I started off with the RF lens and set the aperture to 1.8, just so I had a fair comparison to the Nifty 50. Then used the camera's timer feature to take multiple shots, and here's what I got. After that, I switched over to the EF mount 50mm and kept all of the exact same settings. Once again, used my phone as a remote trigger and got these images. Now, one thing where most lenses struggle in terms of autofocus is when you're in backlit situations and the light is coming directly into the lens. So I took both of these outdoors to do some backlit situations and test out how they both did. Okay, so we came to the park here to test out both the 50mm 1.8 and also the 50mm 1.2, just to see how they do outdoors with some backlit photos. And Vicky's gonna help while we have dogs strapped to us. So hopefully this goes well. All right, there she goes with the sunnies. I'm actually gonna need you to take your sunglasses off. Yeah. And hopefully the sun comes back a little bit more. Okay, so right off the bat here, I mean, it's grabbing her eye pretty well. It's focusing really quickly. All right, 3, 2, 1. Nice big smile. Yeah, it's nice. I'm gonna get a little bit closer too. 3, 2, and nice big cheek. You're just so tall. 3, 2, and gorgeous. Right here. Drop it. It's hard wrangling cats and taking a picture at the same time. So you're doing great, sweetie. Beautiful. Right there. Beautiful. Gorgeous. It does make a little bit of noise when it's trying to adjust. Definitely sounds very like mechanical, and it's pretty loud. Even I can still even hear it, even though it's really windy out here. Okay. All right, let me switch the lens. Okay, so now I have the RF 50mm 1.2 on the camera. I haven't changed any settings, nothing at all. So we're just gonna test this out also. It is a big one. Obviously right off the bat, it's much heavier. 3, 2, and gorgeous. Right here, 3, 2, and cheesy on that smile, make it hurt. Gorgeous. This lens is much faster, even with its focusing. And the sound that it makes, it feels a lot more smooth, and I don't hear it as much. I can hear it a little bit, but it's not as loud as the 1.8 is. All right, I'm gonna get another one right here. 3, 2, and so pretty. Okay, well, just doing a quick glance at the back of the screen here, they both look, I mean, extremely similar, but we're not gonna know until we get these back at the computer and we can really look at them side by side. So let's go do that. Okay, so I've pulled these images into Lightroom to compare them. These are completely raw. They have not had any editing or color correction done to them, so we can see the raw version of both of them. The first one is with the EF 50mm, and this one here on the right is from the RF 50mm. You can see here on the RF, I have a little bit of a rainbow lens flare happening. I was not using a lens hood, probably should have been doing that. Right off the bat, I can see just a couple of differences without zooming in. Obviously, the RF here on the right, the bokeh is a lot creamier. You can see it's just a little bit more out of focus in the background, as opposed to the EF 50mm. The bokeh is a little more, it's just not as out of focus as the other one. Not really a big deal. I mean, nobody's really gonna tell the difference, especially if these are just going on social media or anything, but you can at least see the difference here. Also, another difference I see kind of right off the bat here are the difference in color. The RF 50mm seems to have a little bit more of a green tint, and the EF 50mm seems to be a little bit more on the red side. I actually kind of prefer the coloring in the EF 50mm. It looks a little bit more true to skin tones. The RF has a little bit of a green skin tone. I would definitely be fixing this in post. Also, something else I see, I don't know if you can tell on your screen, but there's a pretty obvious difference in sharpness. The RF 50mm obviously being more sharp, you can see in the eyes. And here in the EF, it's just a little bit more blurry. I'll zoom in here so you can really see the difference. So here's the EF 50mm. We'll zoom in here on the eyes. See, it's not tack sharp. There's just a little bit of cloudiness. Can kind of see me in the reflection of her eyes. It's just not tack sharp detail. Now, if we go over to the RF 50mm, here you can really see a difference in sharpness. Like, you can even see me in the reflection in her eyes. You can see everything is tack sharp. Yeah, you can see me right in there, as opposed to the EF, it's just a little bit more out of focus. So overall, again, if you're just posting on social media, you're not going to see a humongous difference as when it comes to color and sharpness in the bokeh. But if you are doing something a little bit more higher end, if you're printing, you're definitely going to want to go with the RF version. It's just a better look, a lot more sharp. So with both of these lenses, in terms of autofocus, both of them performed flawlessly in backlit situations. But one of the main factors in determining the quality of the lens is how sharp the images are. The cheaper lenses are going to be tack sharp in the center, but they tend to soften out towards the edges. They also tend to have a little bit more distortion. Let's compare how each one of them did. So I pulled these two images from earlier into Lightroom to compare them. Now I've gone ahead and turned off the enable profile corrections because when you pull it into Lightroom, it automatically fixes it for you. But we want to compare how the distortion is, so I've gone ahead and turned it off. On the right, we have the RF 50mm, and on the left, we have the EF 50mm. From afar, you can't really tell. So let's go ahead and zoom in on both of them. Obviously, the RF is a lot more tack sharp here in the center. This one just is a lot softer overall. It is obviously a little bit more sharper in the center here, but it's not a huge difference. It's just the whole thing is a little bit more soft overall. Everything is pretty sharp. So let's pull out here and take a look at the distortion. So I'm going to go ahead and enable profile corrections for the RF and see how it looks. That's after, before, after. So you can see there's a little bit of vignetting. It's not horrible, and there's a little bit of distortion. If you look towards my feet, if you look at the plant above me, there's a little bit of distortion. It's not a huge difference. Now let's go ahead and try with the EF. So as you can see, just comparing them, there's a lot more vignetting here, right? A lot darker around the edges. So let's enable this correction. Yeah, a lot more vignetting here. When I turn this on, it's like, whew, literally night and day. When you look towards my feet there and up towards the plant, definitely a lot more distortion here. So again, I mean, not a huge deal because Lightroom does have these automatic profile corrections. So it's not going to really make or break when it comes to this distortion here. But when you turn it off, yeah, you can see there is a lot more distortion, a lot more vignetting. So sometimes that's an artistic choice. People really like that. I tend to keep this on. I'm not a big vignette person, typically, but that's completely up to you. Now let's talk about the bokeh of both lenses. If you don't know what bokeh is, it's basically the part of the image that's out of focus. And yes, it's pronounced bokeh, not bokeh. I looked it up. You can argue with me in the comments about it if you want. The more bokeh you have, the more depth you create, and the more separation your subject has from the background, and the more likes you get on Instagram. Okay, just kidding about that last part, but let's compare the two. All right, so I've pulled some more images from that set we did earlier here into Lightroom to compare them. On the right, I have the RF 50mm, and on the left, the EF 50mm. So let's take a look here at the bokeh of each one of these. Right, so I can see a difference in both of these, right? The RF is a lot creamier. It's a lot more smooth on the transitions as opposed to the EF here. It's got more of a rough look, not as creamy. The transitions are just not as nice. If we look at this plant over here, yeah, you can really tell the difference here. I think I even see like a little bit of chromatic aberration here in the EF lens. So to my eye, the RF is just a lot more pleasing, and the EF just has a rougher look. It's not as creamy as the RF. Let's look over here. Yeah, you can also see a subtle difference here. See Sadie down here. Yeah, not much of a difference, but I really, really see the difference here in the plant. Like it's just much more better. So, I mean, again, social media, if you're posting these on Instagram, is it gonna be a huge difference? No. But if you're doing something a little bit more professional, or you're gonna be printing these, you're gonna like the RF lens a lot better. Now, you may not think the lens affects the colors produced in an image, but it actually does. When you go higher up in quality, you typically get better glass that's going to transmit light a lot better than a lower quality lens with lower quality glass. Let's see how they both did. Okie dokie. So last images from that set we did earlier, and obviously you can see some differences in color here. My white balance might have been a little bit off when I was shooting these, but you know, that's neither here nor there. And on the right here, I think the sun came out a little bit more, but I didn't want to change the settings because I wanted them to be exactly the same. So whatever, we're going to deal with it. But you can see an obvious color difference. Here on the right with the RF lens, it's a little bit more of a green tint. And with the EF here, it's a little bit more of a red tint. Kind of the same thing we saw with the pictures we took outside when they were backlit. Again, I kind of like the coloring of the EF more. It's just more true to skin tone. You know what I mean? And this definitely has more of a green tint. Obviously, this is much, I mean, look at the sharpness there. It's much, much sharper. You can just see a lot more details in my skin, in the eyes. I mean, this sucker is tack sharp. But I gotta say, I like the coloring of the EF more than I do the RF. So there's a point there for the EF lens. This is my thought overall. The EF 1.8 is gonna get her done, and it's gonna do a decent job at that. It's not gonna keep you from growing your business. Like, look, I started off with this lens and a Canon Rebel T3, and I did great. If you were to get this lens, especially starting out in photography, you would be thrilled. And if you're not blowing up huge portraits, or you're just posting on social media or websites, this is all you need. But based on my work and what I saw today, I don't think I could ever go back to the 1.8. The sharpness and clarity are just things that I can't go cheap on, because I do have clients that are putting these pictures on billboards and things. So the big question, will I actually be purchasing this lens? I think I will be. It just adds that touch of magic to my images it's hard to explain, but it gives me that feeling that the old Nifty 50 used to give me. It got me excited about photography again. So what do you think? Do you think I should make the investment, or do you think I should check out other prime lenses like the 35mm or the 85mm? Let me know in the comments, and if you enjoyed this video, please consider subscribing. I have a lot more of these videos coming, so I'll see you on the next one.